Hi, everyone. Welcome to the skill that L&Ds were taught but desperately need. We're so excited to be here. My name is Paulina, and I'm just introing this amazing webinar with the wonderful Dr. Lola Gershfeld. Yay! So this webinar was very highly requested, and it is something that we know that is so important to learn as an L&D professional. So Dr. Lola is going to present this amazing webinar, but before we get to that, want to remind everyone that we have a podcast called The Leader in You, brought to you by EMC Leaders. And you can listen to it on YouTube, on any podcast app. And you can also follow us on the social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. So we're there to support and help your journey become the best L&D professional you could possibly be. All right, it's time to get started. So Dr. Lola, take it away.
Thank you, Paulina. Thank you so much. Everybody, welcome to our webinar. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're staying warm. If you'd like to share your location in the comments, and I think we can see your comments, and that would be great. I'm here in South Florida, so in Surfside today is about 60 degrees, 67 now. It started kind of cold, and Paulina is in California, so she is probably, a little cooler than here, but maybe the same. Before we dive in, I want to invite us to just slow things down a little bit, take a deep breath. Nothing fancy, just notice that you're here, you're present, and you're engaged with this experience. I see that comments are coming in. Thank you so much. I love Natalie in South Florida. So nice to see you here, Natalie. Teresa, South Florida. That's great. So nice to have you here. Welcome. Very nice. All right. So working with L&D professionals for the last 15 years, working with companies, speaking at conferences, talking to people at conferences, I see a common thread that comes up again and again. There seems to be a disconnect between the training approaches that trainers use and the problems they're trying to solve. And as I go through these common problems, I want you to think about problems that you experience in the workplace. And please feel free to add additional problems that you experience. So some of the problems that I see are turnover that come back again and again, disengagement, conflict, communication skills problem, communication gaps, leadership effectiveness, trust, and culture. So if you have other problems that I have not mentioned that your company is dealing and that you see that coming over and over again, go ahead and share it with your comments, in your comments. Okay. Just give you a little bit to reflect on. All right. Very good. So common, exactly. So to address these problems, what I see trainers do is they use cognitive and behavioral approaches. Okay, they teach people communication skills. They teach people negotiation skills. They give leaders conflict management skills, such as mindfulness or making concessions. They teach team members to make compromises. They teach people how to give feedback, how to ask for feedback, right? These are not bad approaches, but these approaches only address the symptoms of these problems. They don't really fix the root cause. That is why these problems keep coming back again and again. And not because you're a bad trainer or your intentions are bad, because we're taught this way. I mean, I went through the master's degree program, I went through doctorate degree program, and that is exactly what I taught. I was learning. I was taught cognitive and behavioral approaches. I mean, I remember my professors would draw this triangle, and they would say, there's a behavior, there's a thought, and there's emotion. And if you change cognitive thinking, people will change behavior and emotions will change automatically. If you change behavioral approach, thinking will change. They never talked about emotion. Never. So I'll just give you kind of like a quick example. Two people are caught in this interaction, negative interaction that is going nowhere. The whole team is stuck, feeling helpless and hopeless and exhausted. There are some strong emotions that are happening in the room. You may hear defensiveness. You may hear frustration. Some are trying to take sides. Some are trying to defend their positions, right? They are a very common example on what's going on in meetings. Others are disengaging and withdrawing. And the manager calls you and says, help! I can't work with these people. They are so difficult, right? We heard this over and over again. And we as a trainers come, and they say, let's slow it down. Let's challenge those thoughts. Let me teach you some communication, how to communicate better. And we try to convince people. We try to explain to them. We try to help them to be nicer with each other, behave more professionally. This is what we do. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. I mean, that's what I did with my board members, with my team members, with all the people that I worked with. But the problem is, it really causes the opposite of what we intend to do. The opposite of what we intend to do is people leave these interventions feeling discouraged, disappointed, they feel disconnected. They feel resentful inside. They feel not heard. They feel helpless. And they feel alone. And actually, they've become more disengaged than they were before. At least when they were engaged in the conflict and the arguing, they kind of like felt engaged at some level, right? They are fighting for their life in that moment. They are fighting for their relationship. But when people are taught this communication and tell people and kind of like lectured, is they become very down on themselves and their confidence goes away. And not these ideas are wrong, not because people are emotionally don't understand, but because when we get stressed, when we get emotionally disconnected from in our relationships, specifically with our team members, with our managers, we cannot really access our skills that we already have, that the trainers are trying to teach us. We cannot be open to that logic and be responsive. We cannot empathize with the other person. We cannot really collaborate and engage in this reasonable dialogue. Because we cannot do that not because we're trying to be difficult or people are trying to be difficult. People cannot do that because biologically it is impossible for us to access those skills in the moment when we feel disconnected. So in a way, what happens is these cognitive and behavioral approaches are counterproductive to the problems that we are trying to fix. And I have to tell you, it took me so long to figure that out. So I'm kind of like helping you to fast forward to the understanding what goes on in relationships, in the workplace conflict, and why these patterns, high turnover, communication gaps, bad decisions, bad behavior, conflicts, why they keep occurring over and over and over again. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to see how this lands for you. If you can take a little moment and maybe reflect, what do you notice most often after a skill-based training, right? Just noticing a pattern, not judging it, but just noticing what's going on. Do you see after you do the training and or a manager comes back to you or people come back to you, do you see when you send people to training and they come back, everything kind of settles for a little bit, but do you see that same conflict comes back again? Do you see that engagement really doesn't change in a meaningful way? Do you notice that managers maybe are still saying and complaining that employees are still difficult? And do you notice that the turnover is still remains high? So take a moment just to reflect a little bit on what happens. What happens for that in those moments? And maybe share it in the comments. Just give you a little bit of, just to reflect. Okay, let me see. Okay. So it's definitely tells us something very important. And you can note it for yourself. It tells us something important, that the issue isn't effort. The issue isn't intention. And it's not lack of training. The issue is that we have to repair the disconnection that is happening in a team before we can address the skills. Okay. People become disengaged. People become resentful. People don't want to collaborate and engage because they feel disconnected. So just a little quick introduction about the EMC leaders. EMC leaders, I founded EMC leaders from my own frustration of not knowing what is going on in relationships, why people get into conflict, why people continuously get stuck, why they're not productive, why do we have a high turnover. So I was a HR manager, L&D director, CFO, board member, and I was fascinated by that question. So I went to school, got all my degrees, and then I learned after actually I got my degrees that it was the relationship that got people stuck in these negative patterns. So what we do in EMC leaders, we help companies master the art of relationships through the process of emotional connection so they can spend less time on conflicts and more time accomplishing their most important work. Because conflicts are exhausting, very exhausting. Unproductive meetings are exhausting. They drain our energy. So when people master the relationships, understand what happens to people when they get disconnected, and we're going to talk about it, they start to spend less time on wasting time and really more time on focusing and becoming very productive. So I'm very excited about my research and the work that I have done, and the emotional connection process, or EMC, as we call it. I developed through the research and the science of all of these psychologists: attachment theory, John Bowlby, system theory, humanistic theory, neuroscience, experiential theory, emotional intelligence, and attachment and leadership. And of course, Sue Johnson and Les Greenberg, who were founded of emotionally focused therapy for adult relationships. So Sue Johnson was my teacher, and I learned a lot about her. And I've written 4 books on the topic, which really emotional connection goes into the detail of the science and the process. And then navigating difficult conversation is a 3-stage process and 9 steps that actually takes you through the EMC process. The Connected Culture is very short, quick book on reminding how to create and nurture connection. And Evolve is the 24 capabilities of creating emotional connection. And then Team Emotional Safety Assessment is all based on these attachment principles on how to create safety and connection. So once people become connected, what happens is their behavior changes automatically. You don't have to tell people how to change behavior. And that's what we want. We don't want to teach people behavior modification or how to use their skills. They have the skills. What we want is we want people to be connected so the access to those skills becomes available and their behavior changes on their own. So when people feel safe and their skills come back online. They become accessible. The skills become accessible. And what we learn is, What we learn is that the current skills that led by training departments are really skills causes. When we teach people skills, and we don't address the emotional disconnection, we don't address the relationship that is happening, there are more problems. When we lead with emotion as a primary agent of change, now we address the skills automatically, the skills come back online and behavior change. So emotion becomes the primary agent of change. And I'm not talking about being, emotionally driven. No, it's not about talking about emotions all day long or catharsis. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about understanding what drives the disconnection and how to how to help people to repair that connection. So the behavior changes automatically and skills become accessible to them. So why EMC works? Because it's primarily based on the attachment theory, which is most profound developmental theory that psychologists, I think, have ever come up with. And I love attachment because it has never let me down. No matter what issue I'm trying to solve or help companies to solve, whether it is disengagement, conflict, turnover, trust, breakdown in communication, attachment always gives me a map to address the core issues that are driving the problems and that we're trying to change. Okay. EMC works because it is emotion focused. Again, and I will go through the neuroscience a little bit to understand why emotion has such a powerful impact on us. But it really understands the emotional meaning behind the relationships that teams are experiencing and the disconnections that are causing these escalations, or shutting down, or causing this rigidity in the conversation, misunderstanding. And it gives us tools that to structure and address emotions and restructure these disconnections. EMC also works because it is based on neuroscience. We now understand how the brain works. It really shows us very clear connection on how the amygdala responds to the disconnection, how the amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex, and what needs to happen so the amygdala can release that prefrontal cortex hijack so we can access our judgment, we can access our logic, we can access our collaboration and engagement in that moment. So let's talk a little bit about each of these key structures. Attachment. Okay, what attachment tells us is that we are wired for connection. It is part of our survival code. Okay, it is primary need, especially with people we depend on. And we depend on people at work, our managers, our peers, our team members, our co-workers, our bosses. They are all key attachment figures. They consist and they create our environment. So the way we interact with each other, the way we interact with our boss, the way the boss interacts with us, that gives us this feedback loop to tell us whether we are connected or we are not connected. And connection is our safe haven. It calms our nervous system. It gives our emotional balance. When we are in emotional balance, distress becomes manageable so that we can manage that distress instead of avoiding the distress, instead of shutting it down or fighting it. Emotional balance helps us to develop a coherent, positive sense of self, like we become confident within ourselves. When we emotionally connected, we can look inside ourselves. We're not afraid to look inside. We're not afraid of that vulnerability. We can feel our needs. We can understand our needs, and we can ask for what we need in a very coherent and clear way. We can listen to each other when we are in emotional balance. We can support each other. We can ask for support and receive support when we are in emotional balance. And when we have that felt sense of secure connection, when we know people have our backs, when we know we're not alone in this world, that gives us confidence. It gives us autonomy. We can express our opinion freely. We can ask questions freely. It really gives us this effective dependency. So we can go out in the world and keep that emotional balance when we speak to clients, when we speak to customers. I remember working with this company, and the new people who were hired, they had to go out on the client side. They had to look at the products. They had to help them with their technical issues. And if they knew that their team back at their company had their backs and were there for them, they came across as confident. They believed in their product. If they knew that they didn't have that connection, they were very scared of any questions that the client had. So everything how we respond in our world really provides and based on that connection that we have with our manager, with our um, with our team members. So attachment is really not just about providing comfort and support. Attachment is really about growth. So when we are connected with each other, we can grow. We can ask questions. We can be comfortable in learning. And what defines the quality of a secure bond, a secure connection, and secure attachment is the question that attachment has solved. What defines it is that ARE, emotional accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. And I want to say the word emotional in it because it is about how am I opening up to you about emotional, what's happening for me, instead of trying to convince you otherwise. How am I responding to you emotionally? Can I notice when you're feeling stressed? Can I notice when you are worried? Can I hold that space for you? And how am I engaged with you emotionally? Even though I don't agree with you, can I still stay in the conversation with you? So when we feel ARE, as we call it, and the ARE comes from the question, are you there for me? That's the key attachment question that our amygdala constantly asks and senses that connection. If we answer that question, are you there for me, with a resounding yes, that means we had a lot of experiences of emotional accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. And our system is calm. If we answer that question, are you there for me, with a no or a maybe answer, then our system will be always on alert. It will be always watching and getting more sensitive and getting triggered. So this is very important, because when we feel that coming from another person, our nervous system is calm, we can process information differently, we can respond differently, and we behave differently. We behave like normal people. We behave as ourselves, calm and in balance. When we don't have that sense of connection, when we sense the disconnection, when we get triggered, it could be the words we say, or it could be the facial expression. It's very minute because we are very sensitive to the connection. Our amygdala, our brain is very sensitive. We go what attachment calls a separation distress. So we go into panic, we go into protest. We either demand, withdraw, we protest by asking questions or talking fast, or our voice goes up, right? We get that sense that there is a disconnection happening. There's a rejection. There's somehow devalue of our worth happening, and we respond to that. And you see this in teams all the time. You see how people engage in their meeting. You see people communicate. They're writing either like long emails, right? Or they send you emails after emails, or they don't respond at all. This is what we call a protest, right? This is what we call a separation distress. There's a disconnect that is happening in the team. So in EMC, we are very clear that emotional disconnection is the virus. This is what L&D need to be learning: how to repair the connection, how to teach leaders and team members to repair that connection. Because the virus is that emotional disconnection. Conflict is just the inflammation. Conflict tells us that there's something going on in the relationship. And when when L&Ds and trainers learn about how to teach people to repair the connection, you start to see the change happen. So when people are in separation distress, they lose their balance. Now their interaction becomes rigid. They become in a negative pattern. They only see in tunnel vision. They don't have anything else. They are not open to your ideas or to your explanation in that moment. They are in a survival mode. Okay, this is not a character flaw. They're not being difficult. They're not jerks. They're not resisting. It is because of our biology. This is how we are wired. Now, if you don't believe me, I want you to think about your own experience on your own relationship, right? Of people you depend on. It could be your partner, it could be your boss, your manager, and how your skills are no longer applicable in that moment when you get triggered. You know, you hear that tone of voice. Something tells you, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. Something is wrong. Or you get that sense of rejection, and suddenly that, ouch, that hurts. Right? So I assure you, you don't stay calm. I assure you, you're not balanced. I'm not balanced at that moment. And in fact, I have this EMC trainer on my shoulder saying, don't say that. But I say it anyway, because I want to be right. So you do what everyone else does, which is your nervous system goes, this is dangerous. So we understand the distress that people get into when they get disconnected and the negative patterns they get stuck in. Securely attached team members and leaders can acknowledge their need. They can send coherent messages. They can reach out, they can help each other, and they can accept other people's support. Insecure attached team members and leaders are easily frustrated. They're easily irritated, they become aggressive, they shut down and they withdraw. And it's difficult for them to ask for help and stay engaged. Again, not because they don't want to, it's because they don't have access to those skills. Like one finance director said to me, Lola, I become aggressive. I freak out in meetings. And I got written up. I feel horrible, but I don't know what takes over me. I start to yell in meetings. Sometimes I become anxious. Sometimes I shut down and I'm out. I just don't understand. I lose control of my emotions. So in the moment when people lose their emotional balance, actually they want the connection back. but they're doing it ineffectively. They don't know how to slow things down. They don't know how to ask for what they need. They don't know how to share what's going on with them because they are so unregulated in that moment. Or they avoid and shut down. They minimize. I don't need anybody. And then what happens? They suppress, and then they blow up. So what happens is in EMC, you start to help leaders and teams to restructure their patterns, to understand why they behave this way. And the relationship, they understand what causes relationship to get stuck and get stuck in these negative interactions. So they can start to create safety, and it becomes actually reciprocal. They help each other in that moment. Emotion is also EMC is emotion focused as well. And Les Greenberg and Sue Johnson did a really great job in bringing that emotion focused approach into the attachment relationships in personal relationships. And Sue Johnson did a lot of, and her colleagues have done 17 outcome studies showing positive and sustainable results in relationships and behavior and communications when using emotion as the primary agent of change. So what they said is that change happens with a new corrective emotional experience. Okay, change happens with a new corrective emotional experience. That is why EMC is also experiential. It is not about talking emotions. It's not about understanding emotions. It's really trying to understand the experience, what's going on, and putting the system together, which is the process how we structured it, is to understand their triggers, the internal experience happening, what people do and how they behave because of that internal, and what they need for them to feel safe and connected. So when they have this structure, they start to say, oh, wow, this is how I get pulled into this negative cycle. Wow, this is what happens to me when I feel criticized or shut out. Oh, this is what's going on when I'm protecting myself. Oh, this is how I'm impacting you. Because people have no idea how they impact each other. This is the biggest problem, I think, because they don't know how to talk about it. The other day, I was helping a team, and this leader, I'll call him Mike. He got into a negative cycle with a member of another team, and it was in front of everybody. So Mike was trying to defend and protect his direct reports. However, in the process, one of his direct reports, I'll call him Dave, felt very uncomfortable with this whole interaction. And when they had a chance to do the MC process, they understood how they impacted each other. Like Dave said, whew, when I saw you, when I heard you talk about it with this team member, I was so worried that somehow I let you down. I didn't help you out, and you would be disappointed in me. Where Mike says, oh my gosh, I was so focused on defending my team that I didn't even think about how it impacted you. I was worried that I'm disappointing you. I'm embarrassed that I had such a reaction in front of people. Now, so this kind of emotional understanding changes people far more deeply than any behavioral change or skill training. And I want to talk a little bit about emotion, because emotion really becomes the agent of change, because by organizing emotions, by helping people articulate emotions, you actually helping the amygdala part of our brain that hijacks the prefrontal, the skills, that blocks the skills, to be relaxed. That's why we start to behave differently. That's why we have access to the skills. So let's talk a little bit about what is emotion. Emotion is our primary signaling system. It tells us that we are no longer safe in our environment. And it comes from from a Latin word, immovere, means to move. But not just to move, it means to move out. So, for example, feelings like pain, hurt, shame, they meant to be felt. And when emotion comes online, it tells us something is going on. We have to do something. That's why we have this urge in that moment. We have the urge to fight, or we have the urge to flight, right? To flee. We have the urge, something like we freeze in that moment. Emotion, when we get a lot of emotions and it floods our system, like when we become overwhelmed, we have a stress chemical secreted, cortisol. And what it does, it elevates our fight or flight response. So in that moment, we go into the fight, which is we pursuing the connection. Come on, we're trying to prove ourselves, we defend, we lecture, or we go into the flight position. We shut down, we withdraw, we avoid. So this change mechanism, emotion, we cannot really explain things in that moment. Explanations are wonderful. They are interesting, but they don't work when we're falling through space, when emotions take over, when we lose our emotional balance. Now, when we help people to organize emotions, understand emotions, regulate their emotions differently, and connect with each other emotions, what happens is they become so much more in balance that emotions are no longer are so big and so difficult to understand. And when we avoid our emotions, we don't really gain control. We actually lose control. And I want to say this. I heard this webinar the other day, and they talked about how important it is to understand emotions. And they say avoidance is not emotion regulation. When you avoidance is avoidance. Avoidance is avoidance. When you avoid, you are pushing your emotions down. You're shutting them down. So avoidance is very actually dangerous because you think it will help you in the moment. I just want to get away. I just want to do something else. I'm trying to make myself busy. Let's work on tasks. But what happens is other people feel the stress, feel the distance. And that's what emotional engagement means. You are no longer emotionally engaged. You are distancing yourself. You're physically present, but emotionally, you are no longer present. So, real regulation really comes from leaning into emotion. Emotion changes with emotion. It's about being curious about emotion, how we get triggered. It's about understanding why do I feel this way? What raw spots do I have? Understanding what is happening inside of me. So L&D professionals, they're not taught to talk about emotions or maybe work with emotions because emotions in our society have been, so to speak, so dangerous. It's not professional to talk about emotions. HR people push back, or executive teams, leadership teams push back talking about emotions. Because when we talk about emotions, it's vulnerable. But it's no longer vulnerable when we all have the language to do that. When we all have the process, it's just like any other work instruction that you have in your office. So again, we're not talking about emotions. We're not analyzing emotions. We're not explaining emotions. We are helping people to understand, not understand, but organize, clarify, and articulate emotions so they can regain their balance. And that is very well explained by the person whose name Joseph Ledoux. He wrote this wonderful book called The Emotional Brain. And the emotional brain, what happens in it is that the amygdala, he explains this, the amygdala, that part of our brain, gets alert when we feel that disconnection. And in our brain, the disconnection this is processed the same as a danger cue because we're not safe. The person who we depend on is our lifeline. So when we get disconnected from that person, we're no longer safe. And that's what amygdala constantly assesses. Are we safe? Are you there for me? Are you accessible to me? Are you responsive to me? Are you engaged with me? And if the answer is no, then the amygdala obviously is alert, it's activated, and then it hijacks the prefrontal cortex right here. It hijacks, it blocks. So that is why it's very difficult for us to get access to our skills, because that's where our skills are stored. They are stored. For example, empathy skills are stored in prefrontal cortex. Collaboration skills, engagement skills, open to ideas, being flexible, communicative, everything, logic, everything is stored in prefrontal cortex. So when the amygdala is hijacked, when we are disconnected, we are no longer have access to the amygdala. If I sense feeling of excluded or rejected, my amygdala reacts, my temperature drops, my blood pressure rises, my heart rate increases. Everything starts to tell me that I am in danger. I cannot focus on that moment on my skills or on the company. I cannot focus. I'm only focusing on myself at that moment. Naomi Eisenberg at UCLA have done studies showing that rejection on a person's face that we depend on is processed in the same part of the brain as physical pain. So think about it. If you see rejection on your boss's face or on your team member's face, your brain senses and says, ouch, that feels like danger cue. It's like stepping on a nail. That is how in tuned we are. When we get that connection back, guess what? The amygdala relaxes. My body warms up. My blood pressure lowers. My heart rate relaxes. My nervous system comes down. I use less energy because I feel safe. And now I'm completely focused on my work because I have a full access to my prefrontal cortex. Full access. That is so incredible because now we can learn, we can grow, we can thrive, we can explore. We have to do that because we are open in that moment and we are in balance in that moment. So EMC becomes not a corrective model. It is it's not a correcting model. We're not correcting behavior. It is a corrective model because we want to connect with you. We don't want to correct you. That's what L&D and trainers approach can be and should be, is to teach leaders how to connect with their team members, not give feedback of how to correct their behavior, how to correct whatever they're doing. Is they need to assess their connection and know how to connect with their direct reports and how to connect team members within the team, because that connection is what's going to give the team a thriving environment. That connection is going to give the team that access to the productivity that the leader is looking for. And even like in a performance review, I think performance review create a lot of relationship injuries, huge amount of relationship injuries, because people are so focused on understanding on the task and performance, they lose the sense of the relationship and the importance of the relationship for people to perform. If you know yourself, people don't stay for, they might join your company because you pay them well, but they don't stay for the pay. They stay for the relationships that we have with people. So if we understand the nature of emotional connection and know how they work, you start to understand the dance, right? The music of the dance. Every time you interact with people, it's like you inviting them to the dance floor. And that's what we want. We want people to listen to the music. We want people to understand that and to see the behaviors through this attachment lens. So they can understand the negative cycle, they can catch it, they can restructure it, they can call it out, and they can sense, right, when they have an insecure bond or insecure relationship and how to repair that, and when they have secure bond and security in their relationship. So they can understand emotions, so they can feel and tune into that emotional channel. So trainers can learn attachment, they can learn how to hold emotions, how to create a safety and alliance with their people that they're teaching, and how to be the role model of that ARE. Trainers cannot be good trainers and teachers if they're not good role models, if they're not using the process. So in our training programs, we always teach the trainers first and foremost to understand the process, to do it with their teams, so they can know what does it mean to be emotionally accessible. What does it mean? What does it look like? Because people don't even know what it looks like to have a secure attachment. They don't know what it looks like to have a secure emotional connection. So, and again, I'm not talking about uh, something out of this world. I'm really talking about what we have learned in attachment. And attachment has grown so much in the last 10 years. It has grown to, you have so many thousands of studies on attachment in teams, attachment in leadership, attachment in relationships. And so it's all about attunement. Okay, it's all about attunement. All right. So with this process, what you really do is you learn these 4 moves over and over and over again. And I'm going to demonstrate these 4 moves with this example. Okay, with this example. So I'm going to maybe stop sharing for a little bit so you can hear me. All right. Okay, so this is a very common example. And this team is a trainer, a leadership and development team. And these 2 people, I'll call them Jan and Mary. They have been working together for 3 years. Jan is a director of leadership development, and Mary is a manager. She has a team she works with, and they deliver the training programs. So Jan and Mary, they genuinely love working together. They respect each other, they trust each other, and they have a lot of appreciation of the work that they do together. About 6 months ago, something small started to happen. Jan began to arrive to their one-on-ones meetings late. At first, Mary didn't think much of it. It wouldn't bother her. She would wait patiently. She would do things, and the meetings were on Zoom, so it was easy to do something else. But as it keeps happening over and over again, something started to shift inside of her. And when people don't understand what's going on with them, they don't understand how their behavior starts to change. So Mary started to feel really anxious in her meetings with Jan. She felt unsettled. So whenever Jan joins in, Mary would jump straight away into the agenda. There were no more casual check-ins, no catching up. Mary feels pressure, right? Inside of her, she's feeling stressed. She starts to feel like, oh my gosh, these meetings are not important to Jan. On a personal level, she starts to feel not valued. her time is not being valued. On the other side, Jan senses the tension from Mary. She feels her anxiety through these meetings. She starts to pull back because she starts to feel overwhelmed. She also starts to feel like a sense of judgment coming from Mary and a lot of pressure from the upper management. So there's a lot of going on for Jan, and she becomes more withdrawn and avoidant. And ironically, she starts to come to meetings even later than before. Now, neither Jan nor Mary want that distance. They feel sad about the loss of their connection in their relationship. They don't know how to talk about it. They feel so rigid. They are out of balance and they're stuck in this pattern that actually keeps reinforcing the distance that they feel, and they start to feel even more distant, more disconnected, and more alone. So in that moment, you start to think about your, like what would trainers, what would we do from a top-down approach, right? We would maybe call them in, or maybe Jan would reach out to us and says like, we need help. I don't know what's going on in our relationship, but we need help. So the traditional approach, how to address this issue, might sound something like this. Jan, you're the manager. You need to manage your time better, right? So what can we help you? How can you help? What can you do to manage your time better? Let's set expectations so you know that you need to come on time. Or Mary, we need to improve your communication skills. I mean, we know that you want to get the tasks done, but just being so impatient maybe makes Jan so uncomfortable. Maybe you should ask for feedback from Jan, or maybe you can give her some feedback. And what are we doing? We are coaching Mary, right, to say something like, when you're late, I feel frustrated and I need you to be on time. Or we might coach Jan to say, Mary, I'll do better next time. I'll manage my calendar more carefully. I know I have let you down. So outside, it looks reasonable. But if you notice, we have never touched in this conversation, in these coaching sessions, we do not touch the disconnection that is present in the relationship. We do not touch the relationship injury that happened in their relationship. We do not touch the loss of connection that they have experienced, the feeling of not mattering, the feeling of being overwhelmed, the feeling of misunderstanding. We have not addressed any of these emotions. We never talked about emotions, or maybe we talked about it on the surface. You feel frustrated. Of course you feel frustrated. What we focus specifically just how to change the behavior and how to change their communication, and we bypass completely the repair of their connection in the relationship. So as always, as I've seen many, many, many times, people change their behavior temporarily, but they still feel emotionally disconnected in their relationship. They start to feel resentful inside. They feel unheard. They feel misunderstood. And they might put a face and smile, but inside, they're not emotionally engaged. So, how would we replay this with the EMC stance? Okay. Now, again, the goal is to create a new corrective emotional experience through the 3 stages that we have and these 4 moves that I showed you. And I'm going to share with you now this so you can follow along. Okay, let's see. Oops. Okay. Let's see. Let me make this bigger. Oops. Sorry. Okay, here we go. So the first move that we do in the CMC process is we reflect the present process. We are simply naming what's going on. We're not interpreting, we're not fixing, we're just describing back the pattern. So I might say, Jan, when you arrive late, Mary goes straight to the agenda. And when that happens, you start to feel rushed, as if Mary is no longer interested in having regular check-ins. Okay? And you get a sense that Mary is upset and disappointed with you. In response, you withdraw and shut down. Now, Mary, when Jan is late, you go straight to the agenda. You skip the check-ins as you feel the pressure of time. You don't want to disappoint Jan of not performing. So that makes sense. It's valid. You feel anxious and you push through the tasks. So for you both, it feels very unsafe to talk about these things. It's harder to reach for each other. And your cycle is what we call pursue withdraw, which is when Jan is late, Mary feels the pressure to push through. She loses the connection. So Mary, you lose the connection with Jan and you push through it. The more Mary pushes through, the more you, Jan, withdraw and shut down. No one has to be the bad guy, right? It's not, you're not bad people. You just haven't understood the impact you have on each other in that moment and how you get caught in this dreadful dance, dreadful cycle. And you don't see how this dance is actually taking over your relationship, which leaves you more and more disconnected and alone. When you frame it, when you reflect what's going on with people and you actually describing their cycle, you're making the cycle as the bad guy, not each other. They're both victims of this negative pattern that they got into. And that gives people safety because nobody has to be blamed. When people see the dance, which is all about attachment, they start to feel safe. When we help them to focus on the steps in the cycle, how they impact each other, how they can help each other, they start to feel hopeful. They start to get that the blame is the cycle, not each other. The amygdala in that moment becomes relaxed, right? Because nobody has to be defensive, or they don't have to feel attacked. They don't have to feel judged or somehow as the problem. Okay, good. Move 2. Okay, we clarify emotions. We organize emotions. This is the part where we stay with the emotional experience, where people start to understand what raw spot touches them when this person is late or when the person pushes through the agenda. What helps them? What's going on with them? So we create a positive interaction where people start to learn about how to share that vulnerability in a professional and safe way. As they organize their emotions, they start to understand. And again, the amygdala becomes even more relaxed. So in the moment when Mary pushes through the agenda, Jan shuts down because she starts to feel like she's disappointing Mary. She starts to feel like she's not important anymore. When Jan becomes late, Mary starts to feel like she doesn't matter. She's not important. So it's not about, again, talking about it. We are creating a new corrective emotional experience. So I might say, Mary, when that keeps happening, I see, and she has a list of emotions, right? I see that you feel really sad in that moment. You start to feel this tension. You start to feel stress. You feel on edge. And that's surface emotion. Then we go a little deeper. You start to feel like you're not important. You don't matter. You feel sad. You feel fear, right? Fear of disappointing, fear of not being good enough, or fear of not meeting Jan's expectations. So there's a lots of longing for feeling valued in the relationship when we have a disconnection happening. And then I turn to Jan and I say, Jan, when you sense Mary's pushing through the agenda, what happens to you? And she says, I feel like I'm falling. I'm failing. I'm failing as a manager. Mary is disappointed in me. She doesn't want to have our check-ins. She's no longer wants to have a relationship with me. I start to feel so lost. And I feel so sad and overwhelmed in that moment. And when that feeling comes across, I just want to run. That dreadful coming, I dread coming to meetings. Again, we're slowing down. We're really recognizing what's going on with them. And we validate, we stay with their emotions, we stay with their experience. And she starts to saying, all I hear is I'm a disappointed. All I hear, I'm failing. And I say to Jen, that is so difficult. So we name the cycle. Mary, when you start to feel not valued, you get anxious and you go straight into tasks. When you feel that anxiety, Jen, you feel like you're failing and you get overwhelmed. So you push back and withdraw and avoid. And then you come to meetings late, even more. So the more you feel that way, the more you get disconnected. Next step is enactment. Enactment, I say to Mary, Mary, can you help, Mary, can you share with Jan what happens to you in that moment? And Mary says, Jan, when you come late, I start to worry that I'm going to disappoint you. And I start to feel like I don't matter anymore. I start to feel not valued. I know that you're under pressure, and I want you to know that I want to be there for you. But when you come late, I lose connection with you, and I start to worry that our relationship is no longer important to you. Our check-ins is no longer matter to you. And Jan says, Mary, when we skip our check-ins, I start to feel like I have disappointed you. And you don't want to do anything with me. And I failed you as a manager. I feel sad and shamed in that way. And I want you to know that our relationship matters to you because you matter to me. You are important to me. And I care about you. And Mary says, I care about you too. And that moment, the bonding conversation, the enactment, we are correcting the emotional experience, what they have felt. They have felt as if they don't matter and they're not important. But by going and understanding how they impact each other and what's happening with them, they are correcting the message. They're creating a new emotional experience. And now they can talk about other things. But before that, that connection is now repaired. And if you notice, I have not talked to them about communication skills or changing behavior. What we have done is we reflected the present process. We are telling them what's going on in their relationship from the attachment perspective. We organized and clarified their emotions in more depth, obviously, that I didn't go here. We changed the music. We changed the music so they can turn to each other and say, oh my gosh, I do care about you. You are important to me. And I want you to know that you matter to me. This relationship matters to me. We create a new dance for them to experience that connection. And then I say, what does it feel like for you to share that vulnerability or that type of conversation? That's move 4. We process the enactment. And Jen says, it feels good. It feels a lot better than hiding and running all the time. It feels good to know that Mary cares about me, about our relationship. It feels good that I have not disappointed her. And Mary says, it feels good to hear that Mary wants us to have check-ins. I had no idea. I thought she's not, because I'm so focused on my tasks, I don't want Jen to be disappointed in me. I wanted her to know that I'm so happy that I know that she cares about our check-ins. And I want to be there for her. I want her to know that she's not alone in dealing with whatever stress she's going through. What we are doing is we are taking people through ARE, how to be emotionally accessible, responsive, and engaged. And because they long for connection, we have a structure for them to repair the connection. The amygdala is relaxed. The prefrontal cortex is open. They have access. Now they can be flexible in resolving their issue, in helping each other, and solving their problem. So it's not about teaching people skills. It's about helping people to repair their connection. And then we tie a bow to it. We say, look at what you did. You guys were able to risk. You were able to be honest with each other. You were able to stay present and engaged. You were able to be strong and courageous and hear how you impact each other. This is incredible. Look at this. You are changing your relationship. You can understand this. And what happens in this process, I'm not like, am I trying to be like weird nice? No, I'm trying to support them to take new risks. And that is your job. As a trainer, your job is to give that message to leaders and teams. Your relationship matters. Your relationship makes sense. You can understand this dance you're caught in. You can restructure the cycle, the pattern. And look what you did. You are competent. You can do it. And you're doing it already. So as a trainer, you're guiding people to create that connection. So in closing, I want to, I just want to give you a little time to reflect. And maybe if you have any questions before I go through the process of how people get trained in the EMC process. So one of the questions is, what happens if one person is not open to taking risks? And that is a trainer's job. Trainer's job is to create safety. So people will take risk. They have to feel supported. They have to know that they're not the bad guy. They're not the problem. And they will take risks because emotional connection is what is in us. We are wired for connection. So when you give that connection and support to people, you start to see how people change each other. Okay. And you will see, and I see individual changing, people change each other more so than when you give individual coaching, because nothing grows people like emotional connection. If you bring emotional connection into your training programs, you will grow people in a very lasting and significant way. And you start to see how your company start to change. If that is interesting to you, I want to invite you to check out our training programs. We have masterclass, we have EMC journal where people practice the reconnection conversation. We have books, we have facilitator guide, about 200 pages of teaching everything about attachment, about negative patterns, about emotions, and people start to learn the language of emotional connection. When you improve connection, you really get better results. You lower turnover rate. You improve your communication. You improve engagement. You improve productivity. You lower the absenteeism rate. You improve well-being for employees. Everything starts to change. And really, you get better as a team, as a trainers, because you feel competent. You feel engaged, you feel more secure in your own presentation and relationship because you're empowering leaders and teams with most powerful tools of connection. Okay, please follow us and book your one-on-one with me. I would love to learn about your specific challenges that you are going through. I'd love to show you how the EMC training works and what some of the tools you learn and how you can empower your leaders and teams. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. And I really appreciate you being here. And so let me see, Palina, I can add you to the stage.
Yay, that was so amazing. Did you see Trina asked what
Yes,
happens? Yeah, you
yes,
already
yes.
did.
I
Okay,
already answered that
good, good,
question.
good.
If you have any questions, go ahead and type it in. We'll stick around a little bit for a few minutes. But thank you. Hi, Isaac. Thank you for coming. Rob, thank you for joining us. And Donald, thank you so much. I'm so glad you were able to join us. I'm here to support you and to help you and answer any questions you might have.
I think I just value so much what you say, and it's so different than what people are used to in the workplace environment. And so we really tend to kind of slip back into those same patterns of doing more of the behavioral changes and write-ups and trying to correct the behavior, where we really have to understand the importance and significance of understanding people's emotions and creating that connection. So
Exactly.
yeah.
And what's interesting is that when people attend our training programs, and especially trainers themselves, they not only gain the tools and competence of attachment and the emotional process, the reconnection process, they actually improve their own relationships, right?
That's my favorite part. That is my favorite part because it works with, all
Exactly.
your relationships in your life, personal, your children, professional, your friends. And now it's like we don't have to get fired, get written up, switch jobs, cut off people from our life, break up. We could just use this form to really reconnect and communicate our needs. And then, like Teresa said, become accessible, responsive, and engaged when we are feeling like we don't know how to do that. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
yay.
thank you so much again for joining us. Again, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. We have a lot of videos on YouTube. We do podcasts. The Leader in You, as Paulina mentioned in the beginning, we are here to constantly support you and empower you with this amazing process of emotional connection.
Thank you guys. Thank
Thank you so
you.
much. Bye-bye.